When the South Tower of the World Trade Center collapsed on 9/11, every person still in the building was killed. But incredibly, when the North Tower fell, there were people inside who lived to tell the tale. As the building disintegrated, it left a pocket of survival between the 1st and the 6th floors in Stairway B. The 14 people who happened to be there heard hundreds of floors falling on top of them.
You could actually hear the floors hitting one another. Boom, 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 boom. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, oh shit, this is it, we didn't make it.
I rolled to a corner and basically went into a fetal position and just waited for the end.
I thought I was going to be dead in a few seconds. And I remember feeling, I hope, I hope this is fast.
I pretty much saw my funeral, so everybody's at the wake, and my parents and family there.
To survive this avalanche of 500,000 tons of steel and concrete seemed like a miracle. So how did they survive? And what does it feel like to be the ones that got away? This is the untold story of the most dramatic near-death experience in recent history, the miracle of Stairway B. September the 11th, 2001 was a day that would change the lives of the 14 survivors forever. Their story begins with the chain of events that brought them to Stairway B. Most of them were there to save others as New York firemen. At 8:45 a.m., Lieutenant Mickey Cross was at his fire station on East 29th Street when he heard the first reports coming in of an extraordinary incident.
I'm listening to a transmission from a chief, and he was downtown, and he was at a gas leak or something very routine, and he was calling to the fire department dispatcher that he was confirming that an aircraft had hit the World Trade Center.
The plane hit the North Tower between the 93rd and the 99th floors. Josephine Harris was a clerical assistant working on the 73rd floor.
The building just began to rock, and I kept saying, why won't it stop? Why won't it stop?
Among the first firemen to respond to the emergency was Lieutenant Jim McGlynn of Engine 39, based on the Upper East Side. His initial concern was for the safety of his girlfriend.
My girlfriend Kathleen works in that area, so before we left I called and left a message on her voicemail at work that there was a plane that hit the Trade Center, that it was probably terrorism, and to stay away from that area.
Huge fires were engulfing the top of the North Tower. Josephine Harris knew it was time to get out and was trying to remember her evacuation drill.
Always take your pocketbook. And I remember that. You got your keys, you got your money. So, I always have the bag, and I'm letting go of my pocketbook. And then I started down the stairs. But that's when I'm thinking, what's going on?
235 firemen arrived at the disaster area in just 15 minutes. One of the first units to arrive was Ladder 6, based in Chinatown, led by Captain Jay Jonas, a veteran with 20 years service as a fireman.
It put a knot in your stomach, going across, seeing that. Something that you never thought you'd see. You saw the North Tower of the World Trade Center, the top 20 floors in flames.
When Lieutenant Jim McGlynn and his unit arrived at the scene, the tragedy was all too real. One of the first hazards they faced was the bodies of jumpers crashing to the ground.
I saw people jumping. You heard them hitting the pavement. And you realized the utter desperation that these people must be going through in order to jump to their death.
9:03 a.m. A second plane crashed into the South Tower. Within 90 minutes, almost 3,000 people would die from the catastrophic consequences following the dual impact. Mickey Cross and his unit had just got there.
We got showered with debris. We were getting these pieces of material were coming down flaming. I remember seeing that. It looked like, it reminded me like meteorites or meteors or something. We all got off, we got our equipment, and I kind of huddled everybody together. We had a kind of like a little pep rally, pep talk, something. I wanted to say something to the guys. I was nervous, you know, I admit it, but I think that helped me to center myself, you know.
9:10 a.m. More fire units were arriving. A command post had been set up in the lobby of the North Tower, where the fire chiefs directed operations. Jay Jonas was one of those given his assignment by Chief Hayden.
As they came in and we gave them their assignments, you could almost look in their eye and realize that they themselves knew that this was going to be very risky and very difficult for all of them.
I gave them a salute, and I walked over to where my firemen were waiting for me. And I walked over to them and I said, all right, here's the deal. It's a raw deal, but this is what we have.
Chief Jonas came back over, and I'll never forget these words. He just said, boys, they're trying to kill us. Let's go. And you know, you really don't have a choice. You know, you that's what we get paid to do. You go.
New York's firemen were facing the biggest and most treacherous high-rise fire in history.
Every fire has its challenges. Every fire is a little bit different from the other. But this was totally uncharted water. Knowing that this fire was being fueled by jet fuel, you knew that you were going to have to improvise and deal with it when you got up there.
With the lift shafts destroyed, just getting up to the 90th floor was a daunting prospect in itself for firemen like James F. Timiades.
At that moment, I was thinking, God, we have to walk up 90 flights of stairs with all our gear and get up there. I was supposed to go home 6 o'clock that night, and I knew that wasn't happening.
9:25 a.m. The fires in the North Tower are blazing out of control. By this time, Josephine Harris had made it down to the 60th floor. She suffered no injuries from the explosion, but was slowed down by an old injury to her leg.
Around the 60th floor, I looked at the number. That's G, 60. And I stopped, told myself, don't look at the number of floors anymore. And I didn't, and I kept going.
While Josephine was heading down Stairway B, which ran through the building's central core, the firemen were on their way up.
We stopped every 4 or 5 floors. We stopped, take a breather for a minute. And we kept telling people, just keep moving, just keep moving, just keep moving. And people kept saying, you know, God bless you, as we were going up. You know, be careful, God bless you.
On the upper levels, the fires had reached temperatures of 1,300 degrees Fahrenheit, causing the steel framework supporting the Twin Towers to buckle. But the firemen were unaware how close the buildings were to collapsing.
It took us about an hour to get to the 31st floor. And we were regrouping there, and at that time, the building shook so violently that you couldn't stand up. Everybody had to hit the floor.
What had caused the building to shake so violently was the collapse of the South Tower beside it. However, the firemen inside the North Tower were unsure what had just happened. Many of their radios weren't working, and the huge dust clouds made it almost impossible to see anything outside.
I thought the elevators may have been coming down the shafts. Maybe they cut loose and they were coming down the shafts, and I was right near the open shaft, so I was a little concerned about being sucked into the shaft. I'm thinking if the elevator's coming down, it's going to create a vacuum and I could be pulled. You know, this is what was going through my mind.
In the back of my mind, I thought that a piece of our building had fallen off. So I looked at Billy Burke. I says, all right, Billy, you go check the south windows. I'll go check the north windows. We'll see what we can see. And I couldn't see anything. All I saw was the white dust pressed against the glass. I looked at Billy Burke, and I asked him, is that what I thought it was? Thinking he'd say that part of our building collapsed. And he just looked at me with a straight face. And he said, the South Tower's just collapsed.
It was a disaster on an unimaginable scale. The streets around the World Trade Center had been engulfed with debris and dust, leaving the command structure of the fire department in tatters. It was now only a matter of time before the North Tower would also fall.
I knew what kind of danger we were in. The time wasn't on our side anymore, that we were going to be lucky if we got out of here alive. So I looked at my guys and I says, all right, guys, if that one can go, this one can go. It's time for us to get out of here.
But time had run out. In the aftermath of the collapse of the South Tower, dazed firemen were trying to regroup and get to grips with the catastrophe they faced. All they could hear were calls for help and the high-pitched personal alarms of injured colleagues going off all around them. But up in the stricken North Tower, some of the firemen making their way down still weren't aware of the extreme danger they were in.
We weren't running. We weren't even really moving all that fast, you know. We were basically at a very steady pace. We stayed together and we were working our way down.
I thought I was very clear to my men that the other tower had collapsed. But I didn't find out till later that they really didn't understand what I was telling them.
The whole way down, he was like, he just said, come on guys, let's keep moving, let's go. A couple times we'd stop and we'd look around, you know, maybe take a look on a floor. Come on guys, let's keep moving.
10:15 a.m. Captain Jonas and his Ladder 6 crew had reached the 15th floor when they ran into Josephine Harris on Stairway B. Even though her office manager was helping her down, her leg was so bad she could only move at a snail's pace.
Every fiber in my being was telling me, keep going. You know, you're wasting time. Get out of this building.
And I turned around and said to Captain Jonas, I said, what do you want to do? And he said, grab her, let's go.
Somebody told the manager that was with me, because he stayed with me, that he could go. They would take care of me. This was Ladder 6. And we start down. I'm getting more and more tired. It's really getting to me now.
I helped her as much as I could, and we moved down, but it was a very slow process. She was, her legs were giving out. She was just all beat up.
I'll be behind Billy Butler. And I said, Billy, can you move a little faster? And my speech would be slower and more deliberate. Inside, I'm screaming. We got to get out of this building. We got to move faster. We got to move faster. So we're not going to make it.
It was 10:24 a.m., 25 minutes after the collapse of the South Tower. Captain J. Jonas and Ladder 6 had helped Josephine down to the 4th floor. Then they ground to a halt.
Once we got to the 4th floor, Josephine Harris couldn't stand up anymore. And she told us to leave her. We weren't going to leave her.
And I'm really, really tired now. And I think I said something to them like, leave me. I want to sit down, because I wanted to sit down. And they could just leave me.
It's that clock ticking that, you know, we don't have any time. You know, every second that passes by is a second closer to us not making it out of here.
It was this decision to stay with Josephine that saved them, as it meant they were in the only place on Stairway B where it would be possible to survive the imminent collapse.
This way!
In the lobby, as others ran for their lives, Lieutenant Jim McGlynn knew one of his colleagues was still on the stairway. He decided to run back to rescue his friend.
I told the guys, I said, all right, you guys stay right here. I'm going to walk in and see if we can go back and find John. So I walked back into the stairwell and walked up a couple of flights.
But James Eftimiades and the other crew members disobeyed Jim's order. They joined in the rescue mission, following him into the stairway that would save them all.
As soon as I got into the stairwell, you heard creaking of metal, and you just knew that the building was coming down. It was so loud.
That's when the building began to shake again. And you knew exactly what was going on this time, there was no doubt, because you heard the floors landing one on top of the other.
You could actually hear the floors hitting one another. Boom, 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 boom. And as it fell, it got faster.
Every time a floor hit another floor, it would not only make a noise, but it would cause tremendous vibration. So we're being bounced up and down off the floor, hearing this collapse coming closer and closer.
Mickey Cross was caught on the second floor.
My helmet started flying off my head. I had forgotten to snap my helmet. So I grabbed my helmet. I guess instinctually, I just pulled myself down into the corner.
The collapse of the North Tower created a massive rush of air.
I was blown down 6 stories down to the first floor, and all I can remember while I was being blown down was, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. There wasn't any time to think about anything.
The 110-story tower disintegrated in just 10 seconds.
It was that fast, yet for me it was kind of slow motion too at the same time. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, oh shit, this is it, we didn't make it.
Faced with what seemed like certain death, the trapped firemen thought their last thoughts and prepared to die.
In those 10 seconds, I was like, well, I'm 33. What have I done with my life? Worked almost all the time. My wife is going to, be a widow now. And I pretty much saw myself. Pretty much saw my funeral. I saw everybody at the wake at my funeral, and my parents and family there.
You think about everything, I guess, that you haven't done in your life. And you realize that, is this it? Are you going to make it out of here? And I was just too young, and I have too much more to do with my life than for this to be it.
I thought I was going to be dead in a few seconds. And I remember feeling, I hope, I hope this is fast. Because I had a fear of being trapped, like say with a broken back or severely injured, and still being conscious and alive.
It was strange, but I was at peace when the collapse actually started. I said, all right, whatever's going to happen now is going to happen. And I hope it doesn't hurt too much, but the fear was gone.
The collapse of the North Tower killed over 1,300 people trapped inside the building. But some of the concrete walls encasing Stairway B had remained intact, and enclosed within them, 14 people were still alive. As they opened their eyes, it seemed as if a miracle had happened.
I could hear Mike. I could hear him groaning. I could hear him called out to me. I called out to him, so I knew he was alive.
From the neck up, I seemed okay, but everything else was just like pins and needles. I mean, I was slapping my leg with I'm watching my arm hit my leg, but I can't feel it.
I had my flashlight on my side, and I looked at my hands and looked at myself to see if I was bleeding or anything anywhere.
When he heard noises around him, Captain J. Jonas realized he too had somehow survived the disaster.
I wanted to know who was still alive. And I started calling them out by name. My guys, this is Billy.
All of a sudden, I heard this voice. It was Captain Jonas. He goes, "Billy, are you there?" And he had been right behind me. And I said, "Yeah, I'm here."
The entire Ladder 6 crew and Josephine Harris had survived inside a dark and dust-filled cavity within the collapsed shell of Stairway B. This miracle initially baffled the experts, but now they offer a tentative explanation. The tower fell with its exterior collapsing outwards at a faster rate than its interior, leaving a protected stump towards the base of the building. It was here that the survivors were trapped. Their ordeal was far from over, however. When the tower fell, the man who was to play a vital role in their rescue had just arrived on the scene. He was Lieutenant Glenn Rohan of Ladder 43.
We look back, and here comes this huge cloud. And we ducked in this little alleyway, and the cloud just went flying past us. And I'm thinking, okay, we're in pretty good shape, but I look to the side, and the cloud is coming now from the east side, too, to totally envelop us. It was lights out. It was completely black.
As the dust began to clear, radio traffic suddenly increased dramatically with Mayday calls.
I got on the radio, and I transmitted my own Mayday message. I says, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Sea Officer of Ladder Company 6. We're trapped in the B stairway of the North Tower.
However, the scale of the disaster made any coordinated response to the hundreds of Mayday calls virtually impossible. The battered firemen outside the building had narrowly escaped death themselves and were in a desperate state. Ladder 6 waited for a response to their call for help, but there was no reply.
Initially, we just sat tight. We made Josephine as comfortable as we could, and we just stayed quiet and listened and monitored the radio.
We're sitting there, and I'm wondering, how am I going to get out of here? I'm thinking, I should have called the kids. It's been about 2 weeks. Then it goes back to, how are they going to get me out of here?
Also trapped further down in Stairway B was Lieutenant Jim McGlynn and his crew.
My concern was the rest of this building is coming down, and we have a limited amount of time to get out of here. So I looked around at the building and was trying to find other ways out.
Lieutenant McGlynn was talking to us, and he's like, guys, can you see my light? So we said, we can hear you, we can see your light, but there is no way out of here. We were in just a tight little teepee concrete vault.
Another survivor was Mickey Cross. Trapped alone on a ledge, away from the others, he was even more confused about the disaster he'd miraculously lived through.
I had the thought on occasion that, okay, wake up now. I was in a dream, that this was a nightmare. And I said, okay, I want to wake up now. I want to go downstairs and have a cup of coffee with the guys in the firehouse and shoot the breeze. Because this can't be real. This can't be happening.
By 11:30 a.m., the survivors had been trapped for an hour in the smoking remains of Stairway B under a pyramid of 50 feet of twisted steel and concrete. They were in total darkness, and with no radio contact, they had no idea what was going on in the outside world.
We're trying to figure out what exactly has happened to us. We survived some sort of catastrophic event, but we don't know how bad it is. Did the top of the building fall off? Couldn't be the whole building collapsed because we're still there. We're in this stairway. It's twisted and rubble-filled, but it's there.
In the debris field above them, the firemen were just beginning their search and rescue operations, but the chaos and destruction that confronted them made it all painfully slow and extremely dangerous. Mickey Cross feared they would all be dead before anyone found them.
I had no idea what was over us. I'm thinking 110 stories. How much rubble that is, if they start pulling it apart, how long would it take for them to get to us? So there were times it was very wondering, they'll never get to us. It might take weeks and weeks,
It soon became clear to the outside world that there would be very few survivors. Those who feared their loved ones had been killed when the towers collapsed desperately tried to find out if they were alive. Mickey Cross's girlfriend Christine telephoned his fire station. She was told he was missing.
I started yelling at the firefighter who answered the phone. I was saying, what do you mean? What do you mean? He's just not back from the job yet. And then I came out of my little denial, and I I said, listen to me, I'm calling this disaster a job. And then I went out to look for him.
Strict security measures made it virtually impossible for family and friends to get anywhere near the World Trade Center site. So Jim McGlynn's girlfriend Kathleen went to his fire station for any news of him.
I just started asking a lot of questions, and I said, well, you can at least tell me when they responded. And at first they just weren't sure, or they just didn't want to tell me. And then one of the firemen came up to me and he said they responded at 8:52. And it was then that I really started to fall apart, because I realized if they left at 8:52, they were down there. And I knew what happened.
Hundreds more firemen were now arriving at the disaster area, but Captain Jay Jonas's Mayday messages were still not getting through. Trapped down in the remains of Stairway B, there was nothing else Jay could do.
We realized we can't get ourselves out. And that's a big mental leap for a fireman to take, because we're so used to being the people who are going in to rescue someone. Now, the roles are reversed, and you realize you're helpless yourself.
But with the survivors buried alive beneath a debris field that extended over 16 acres, it seemed they would need another miracle to save them. It was midday on 9/11, and in the chaos and confusion, Captain Jay Jonas's Mayday messages were still not being received. The firemen had no idea there was a pocket of survivors nearby. Then Jay again tries to make radio contact. Unexpectedly, this time his call is picked up. One of the officers coordinating rescue operations is Chief Nick Visconti. He responds to Jay Jonas's Mayday call.
I got a radio transmission from Nick Visconti. I heard Operations Post to Ladder 6. Operations Post to Ladder 6. This is Jay, where are you?
Okay, 10-4. North Tower, Stairwell B is in boy on the second floor.
But the location Jay gave was unbelievable to them. The North Tower no longer existed. They asked for his location again.
He asked me that a couple times, and one time he asked me that. Somebody else got on the radio and said, "Where's the North Tower?"
I remember somebody saying it, "Where's the North Tower?" on the radio. And I said, "Oh, shit." I says, it's not good.
Chief Visconti sent out rescue teams to look for Ladder 6. However, first they would have to find the remains of the North Tower. In the meantime, the chief kept in contact with Jay Jonas.
One of the few times I got choked up, he just kept coming over the radio and said, "I'm coming for you, brother. I'm coming for you."
News that the firemen of Ladder 6 had survived the collapse of the North Tower got through to Jay's wife, Judy, but she was told they were still trapped.
It was a relief in some ways to hear that he was alive and that he was trapped, but there was many stories of guys being trapped and not coming out. So trapped is not a great word for a fireman's wife, but he was alive.
There was no news at all, however, about most of the missing firemen. Chief Hayden, who was coordinating search and rescue operations, had the painful job of answering questions from next of kin.
There were many men that I know and work with coming up to me and asking me, you know, "Pete, Chief, have you seen my son?" And son's coming up, you know, "Chief, have you seen my father?" And it was a very difficult time to look them in the eye, and knowing full well that most likely their son or their father had been killed.
By 1:30 p.m., the firemen had now been buried in Stairway B for 3 hours.
I started to freak internally. I never voiced anything, but inside, I was freaking out, and I wanted to get out of there, you know. And But I started to look around, and everybody else was calm. Josephine was calm, so I started to talk to myself to calm myself down.
Glenn Rowan and his Ladder 43 crew were one of the first rescue teams sent out to try and find the Stairway B survivors.
We're walking across this debris field, and it was pretty hazardous area to be. And I'm like, God, dear God, I just say to myself, it was the first time I said, you know, just, you know, keep my guys safe. You know, this is dangerous. This is very dangerous.
Nearby, Josephine felt helpless but remained calm and composed.
I remember one time saying to God, if you get me out of here, I'll never ask for anything again. And I said, nope, I'm not going to say that.
The next thing the survivors remember is that down in the depths of Stairway B, the dust lifted, and it was as if another miracle had happened.
All of a sudden, a ray of sunshine hit the stairway. You know, you're looking at it, you're in this darkness, and then all of a sudden a ray of sunshine hits the floor. I said, where's that coming from?
It was just clearly sunlight. Maybe it was about 12 inches wide, and it was all peppered with this dirt and debris and running through it. But it was the most beautiful sight in the world. It was almost hard to believe, this sunlight coming. I mean, this is a 110-story building fell down right on top of us, and I'm on the 3rd floor looking at sunlight.
The hole letting in the sunlight proved to be the way out of Stairway B. The first trapped fireman to emerge through the hole set up a rope, and some of the survivors began to climb out. The others were still trapped beneath the wreckage.
Somebody goes, there's a fireman. And sure enough, we looked out through this hole, and there was a fireman.
He goes, how close are you? And I just said, I'm going to scream. And I screamed at the top of my lungs, probably to let out some emotion. And he said, oh, okay, I got you. You're right over there. I could just see them starting to come out of the hole. This incredible area, and then I can't believe there's people walking out of this spot. It's just so dangerous. And where did they come from? Where were they?
After being buried for over 4 hours, the firemen were astonished by the scale of the devastation surrounding them.
I looked around and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. You know, all I could see is fire and smoke and twisted debris. And it looked like we had just been hit by a nuclear bomb. Yeah, I says, wow. I can't believe I survived this.
The first rescued fireman set off across the treacherous debris field with one of the Ladder 43 crew leading the way. Meanwhile, Glenn Rowan climbed down into Stairway B to look after Josephine and the other survivors who were still trapped inside.
I remember seeing him come down, and he's on a rope. How are they going to get me out of here on a rope? You look around the place, it's totally disaster.
I said to Josephine, you're okay, you're going to be fine. We have more people coming and more equipment. We'll get you out of here safely.
Having put Josephine at ease, Glenn Rowan then turned his attention to Jim McGlynn, who wouldn't leave without 2 of his crew members who were trapped below him in a narrow void.
I said, okay, great, Glenn. What do you have with you? Do you have a rescue? Do you have a squad? Who's with you? And he says, at the moment, it's just me. And I said, okay, well, we have a problem.
You can just hear the disappointment in his voice. He's like, oh, we're going to be here so much, you know, how are we going to get my guys out? We got to get my guys out.
While Glenn Rowan went to work digging out the 2 trapped firemen, the battered survivors who had been rescued from Stairway B now faced a new ordeal. They had to make their way across a debris field made up of mountains of rubble and deep voids in the ruins of the World Trade Center.
There was no solid footing there. This was just twisted, bent up beams. There was, some were cut, there was sharp edges, but there was nothing solid.
After an hour of relentless effort, Glenn Rowan and his crew managed to dig out the last 2 remaining firemen of Ladder 39 from the void where they had been trapped. All 14 survivors from Stairway B were now free from the building, but they still had to make it to safe ground. Mike Meldrum's back was injured, and he was very unstable on his feet. He feared he wouldn't be able to make it through the 16-acre debris field, littered with 30-foot-high hills of broken beams and shifting masonry.
I remember saying to myself, I don't know how the hell I'm going to do this. I just don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, if you missed a step, if you fell, there was no way to get you back.
Mike looks at me, he says, Cap, I can't do it. I can't climb up. I said, yes, you can climb up. He says, no, I can't. I says, Mike, your wife and kids are on the other side of that hill.
Mike Meldrum did find the strength to make it to safety, as did all the 14 survivors who were buried in Stairway B. Remarkably, none of them were seriously injured. All were given first aid as soon as they came out. This is one of the survivors, Billy Butler, on a trolley being given medical attention. The first thing Mike Meldrum wanted to do was to escape from the nightmarish landscape and get back to the security of his fire engine.
I remember looking for the trucks, because all the trucks were there. And I could see the walkway bridges, they were down. I couldn't see any trucks. There were no... I says, my truck should be somewhere right here. And I couldn't see it. All it was just mounds and mounds of debris. And I think that was the first time I really got to look back. And there was nothing in these buildings.
3 p.m. Jay Jonas was looking for a command post to report in. He saw Chief Hayden standing on top of a fire truck, coordinating the rescue operation.
Jay came up, and he reported. He stood there, and I'm looking down at him, and he saluted me, and he says, Captain Jonas, reporting for duty. And I just couldn't help but smile at him, because this was one of the bright moments of the day.
It was a very emotional moment for him and I. He looks down, and he starts crying. I look up and I'm crying. And he says, Jay, it's good to see you. I says, it's good to be here.
Mickey Cross was wandering around in a daze trying to find his crew members. Then he saw a man behind a desk at an improvised command post.
There was a flat table with some papers on it, and it was the chief sitting there, and I said, that looks like someplace I should go. And I said, I'm Lieutenant Mickey Cross, Engine 16. So he looks at me, he has this list of names. He goes, oh, geez, we have you missing as presumed dead. He says, no, I'm here. And then I asked him, I says, where's my company? Did they all get out okay?
All of Mickey's crew were out of the North Tower before the collapse occurred and survived. But Mickey's girlfriend, Christine, had no news of his whereabouts.
The condition of the men that I saw and the women coming out of there, it didn't look promising. And it's, 3 o'clock-ish, and still there was no word about Mickey.
As soon as Jim McGlynn had received first aid, he started worrying about the other firemen in his unit.
I just went over and I got myself checked out, and I had a lot of dust in my eyes and glass, and I guess when they washed them out. Nobody was sure of where people were, of the magnitude of our losses. There were estimates of 100, 200, 300 dead, but nobody was really sure.
All the men in Jim's unit survived, and at last his girlfriend Kathleen got the news she desperately wanted to hear. Jim was safe.
I felt my whole body just feel relieved. And I just said my prayers of thanks.
James F. Tamiade suffered severe breathing problems. He was given emergency treatment, then taken to hospital. Before he went, he managed to speak to his wife.
I called my wife. I said, it's me. I just want you to know I'm okay. I gotta go. Call my mom. Let her know I'm okay. So she says, okay.
There was relief and euphoria at having survived against all the odds. but there would be a price to pay for those who owed their life to the miracle of Stairway B. By night time on 9/11, the burst of optimism that came from finding the survivors of Stairway B was beginning to fade. While exhausted firemen went home, the 14 survivors themselves were shell-shocked. Sal D'Agostino had made it back to his fire station.
Well, we get back to the firehouse, and we walked into the office, which is right off the apparatus floor, watching it on TV, and that's when we really hit us the magnitude of this whole thing. I went upstairs to take a shower, and I basically was in the shower, and that's when I kind of broke down. I started crying in the shower, and shaking, and just a mess, basically.
After a long and difficult rescue, Josephine was given a medical checkup. Then she went home.
And when I got home, I looked at myself in the mirror, and I had to take steps back. I was shocked at what I looked like. I get the television on, and I start hearing all this. And I lost it. I just lost it right there in the middle of the floor. Just unbelievable.
For hours, Mickey Cross aimlessly wandered the streets before returning to his fire station in the evening, where he was reunited with his girlfriend, Christine.
Me and Christine, we walked to my apartment, and I must have fallen asleep. I don't remember the rest of the night. She says I was yelling in my sleep that night. I don't recall.
Mick shook like a leaf and screamed all night long in his sleep. He has no recollection of it. You couldn't go near him. It was like he was going to snap like a tree branch.
As the night wore on, Glenn Rowan and his unit eventually went home exhausted.
I wanted to see everyone. I wanted to hold my wife. I wanted to see my kids. They were all sleeping, of course, but just wanted to spend some time in their rooms, just being so fortunate that I was able to do this. And so many of our guys aren't going to be able to do it tonight.
However, for the 14 who survived inside the collapsing North Tower, it was very difficult to return to everyday life. Very soon, the trauma of their near-death experience came back to haunt them.
About 3 days later, I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning, uncontrollably shaking. My wife was going to call an ambulance for me, but I convinced her somehow not to do that. And evidently it took 3 days for all the adrenaline to come out of my body, and then I started feeling everything. The emotion, the pain in my leg and my back, it all came out about 3 days later.
The survivors dealt with the emotional fallout of 9/11 in the most unexpected and extraordinary ways. Mickey Cross asked to be assigned to search and rescue operations. Immediately going back to the scene of his worst nightmare proved to be terrifying, but therapeutic.
We were approaching the World Trade Center, coming down West Street, and I was sitting in the front of the bus in the first seat, and I'm looking at the Trade Center, and I saw all the smoke, and the structures were up, and the burning, it was like an orange glow. And that was the first time I got scared, and I remember thinking, what the heck am I doing coming down here? And after a while, I just got used to it. I got over that uncomfortable feeling. I wanted to do my part, you know, to help fix this thing. And it wasn't just finding firefighters. Of course, I'm a firefighter. It was just finding the people.
The remains of several hundred people were recovered from Ground Zero and ceremonially buried. But there was no trace left at all of over 1,500 who died. For those who had cheated death in Stairway B, there were mixed emotions, and few could escape the agonies of survivors' guilt.
The effect it had on me initially was very euphoric feeling. I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. There was a euphoric feeling about being alive, and then there was also a lot of guilt and depression about being alive. You know, at one point, you know, you want to jump up and down and let everybody know you're alive. The other point is a lot of good guys didn't make it. A lot of civilians got killed, and who am I to say anything? So, you know, initially I didn't want to talk to anybody about it.
Then came the soul searching. The survivors tried to make sense of every move they made that morning and every decision that led them to the lower levels of Stairway B, where they lived whilst all others around them died.
There were several points in the day that we could have taken a different turn, and it would have been catastrophic for us. I wish I knew, you know, I wish I could say that I knew all the decisions I were making were the right decisions, and that's not true.
Josephine believes it truly was a miracle, and that she was intended to be there that day.
That morning I had said to myself, oh, my stomach hurts. And I told myself, Josephine, get an Alka-Seltzer and go to work. And I forgot all about the stomach ache and everything and went on to work. I was supposed to be there, because if they were going at their pace, if I was going at their pace, we wouldn't be here.
Stopping to save Josephine Harris, that was really a major decision for us, for me and my guys, and for her too. If we didn't stop to save her, where would we have been?
The firemen who survived have told their story to bear witness to the courage of their colleagues. 343 died on 9/11. It was the darkest day in the history of New York's fire department. The miracle of Stairway B is remembered as a moment of hope amidst the tragedy of that day.
There probably isn't one of us in the group that couldn't rattle off 30 or 40 names of guys that they knew, that they had a couple of beers with, that they went to fires with, that we lost that day. You know, and it's something that we don't want to forget. We're not going to forget it.
We continue with the tragic events of 9/11, captured in a single image airbrushed out of the media's history of the day. And the falling man, next.